Now, a year from now, the UK will go to the polls, and there's no doubt the political parties in this country are very aware of women's issues and the potential power of the women's vote. One of the issues that will be at the forefront of the minds of those preparing the election manifestos will be what has become known as hard-working families, children living in poverty, and, of course, women who go out to work and childcare. So what do parents want from government, and what are governments likely to be able to deliver? Well, Samantha Callan is Associate Director for Family, Early Years and Mental Health at the Centre for Social Justice. Naomi Eisenstadt is a Research Fellow in the Department of Education at the University of Oxford. Naomi, you were very much involved in the setting up of Sure Start. Why has early childhood become such an area of critical interest to politicians in recent years?
There's a lot more that we know now about how important child development is in the first 3 years and the first 5 years. I do not believe, and this doesn't mean it's all over, but if you can get a firm foundations, if you can get a strong beginning, it builds resilience for the future. And we know so much more about what builds quality into an early childhood experience.
What would you say builds quality into it?
Well, there's two things that make the biggest difference to children. The biggest difference is actually the home learning environment. Much bigger difference than any childcare provision. But the quality of childcare provision makes a huge difference. And the importance of those two features is that we know very clearly how to deliver high-quality childcare. It is much more difficult to improve the home learning environment.
Why, Samantha, has the Coalition been so keen to extend childcare and preschool education? What have they been hoping to achieve through that?
I think what's really different this time around when we're coming up to the election and in the run-up the last couple of years is childcare has become something that is a real electoral bribe, I would say. That the Scottish nationalists are saying will equivalise primary school hours with preschool hours. All the main parties, Labour came out today saying 25 free hours for the 3's and 4's. Whereas you can't come out with unfunded tax cuts anymore and be able to hold your head up, I think childcare subsidies are operating in a very similar way. They're a very acceptable way to help what's being termed hard-working parents. And I would just say it's not enough. There's more than one way to improve outcomes.
It's a bribe, an electoral bribe, Naomi.
I don't disagree with that. I think that it does appeal to huge numbers of parents. The 25 hours that Labour's come out with is about working parents. It's not if you're not in employment. And we know from the EPI research, Effective Provision of Preschool Education, led by Kathy Silva and Ted Mellish, that 15 hours a week actually for the developmental gains, if high quality, is enough. So there is this tension between, is this a policy about working parents or is it a policy about improving child development?
What would you say it is, Samantha? Improving early education or getting women into work?
Well, it's both. Obviously, when a party or a government describes the rationale behind its policy, they always come out with both. But what I find pernicious is, I'm not a complete philistine when it comes to childcare. I think for many families it's absolutely essential. But if you are well off, you can afford for one parent to stay at home and invest an enormous amount. And as Naomi's absolutely rightly said, the home learning environment strongly influences children's educational and social development, but it is not itself wholly determined by the parents' education, by their occupational background. This idea that poor parents are going to be really bad at looking after their children in the early years is incredibly patronising, inaccurate, not always the case. But our current taxation system is really skewed against single earners, so some levelling of the playing field is absolutely essential in this.
But how far, Naomi, can early education tackle social inequality?
Social inequality is different from poverty. So certainly early education can raise the attainment of poor children and it can flatten the gradient, but it can never make a level playing field. But it can improve outcomes, and if you start school ready, your chances of doing well at school are improved. If you start school already at a disadvantage, that disadvantage continues and it's makeup. all the way through. So high quality early education can do a lot. But it is about the journey of the child and the journey of the parent. So one of the areas that I think is really important, and I think where Samantha and I would agree, is about maternity and paternity leave. So I think it's wonderful that we have 9 months paid maternity leave. I think protecting the first year of the baby to be with mother and father is enormously important.
So you want to see both parents having it?
I would like to see more flexibility, as the coalition government is bringing in, but the rate of pay is well below national minimum wage. So again, the poorest parents would have to stay in work because it won't make up pay.
I think flexibility is absolutely the word that I would back up completely. When we did polling on this in 2008, we found almost 90% of parents said more should be done to help parents stay at home in the early years. And 97% said the government's got a role to play in this. 80% finance is the main driver, the main pressure. And 2/3 said parents are encouraged, they believe parents are encouraged to put children into daycare earlier than they would otherwise want to. And we just quite simply do not have sufficient flexibility. And let's look, over 50s, front page of the Independent, over 50s, struggling, the women struggling in the labour market nowadays. Now, it's possible that they took a hit when their children were small. And we need, this is why I'm not completely against childcare by any means. But what Sylvia Ann Hewlett says, Harvard Business Review, is we need more forgiving career trajectories. In other words, being able to take a bit of time out, investing maybe in your...
For both men and women.
Exactly. It's absolutely that. And we're only going to see real cultural change when we take this away from being purely a women's issue.
It's interesting, though, that parenting classes generally seem to have a low take-up. Why are those schemes, which exist, not really promoted by government?
I think that's another really important question. We've been pressing the government. They had... the CAN parent trials, they set the targets very, very high for take-up, unrealistically high. But they also set a high target and put almost no rhetorical backup behind what they were doing in parenting. And so this government has got to be much less kind of apologetic about what it's doing to strengthen relationships, for example. The amount of money in the transferable tax allowance, it's great that we've got something for single earner families like that, but it's £200 per year as opposed to £2,000 per year when you're both earning. You only get a transferable allowance if only one of you is earning. But there's a real imbalance here that's not helping the poorest, I don't believe, because parenting deficits have to be addressed where they are, and we're not tackling them if we're just getting the kids into childcare.
Naomi, with only so much money to go around, what should the priorities be?
I just think there are some very hard decisions between, are we ameliorating the impact of poverty on this generation of children, or are we reducing the numbers of poor children? If you want to reduce the numbers of poor children, then it is about employment. But it's about well-paid employment that actually does lift children out of poverty, because we know now that over half of poor children are in families where at least one adult is working. So there's a whole economic issue there. In terms of the priorities for me, things like children's centres, I'm on record. I don't think we need 3,500 children's centres. I would rather see fewer, better.
Absolutely.
I would rather see them heavily invested in the poor areas where they have the full suite of services. The big mistake we made was spreading the jam so thinly that nobody could taste anything.
And Samantha, at this point, you seem to be agreeing.
Yeah, I mean, I would also say, though, that if we really are serious about tackling child poverty, we have to get underneath our very high family breakup rates. Half of all children born today will not grow up with both their parents. And family breakdown is not just a result of financial disadvantage or driven by it. It also drives poorer outcomes, child poverty. And we, again, that's something that the government has got to unapologetically say we need to start tackling.
Samantha Callan, Naomi Eisenstadt, thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you.
Now, Hillary Clinton has stepped into the public arena this week by taking on one of America's most controversial issues.